So hello everyone. Today it's an honor to introduce Roop Singh. He's also from Punjab. And I remember him from his TEDx talk last year, actually in 2020, when he talked about how digital assets are changing the future of value. And now look at them, they are called NFTs now, which are in such a hype. So that's why today we'll be learning about blockchain and how it can actually change the lives of students, because Roop is the best person to learn from in this technology. He has been writing and publicly speaking about blockchain technology since 2017. So that's why, please, Roop, can you please introduce yourself and share your journey to blockchain?
Well, thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction and Sat Sri Akal. It's good to be with you.
So ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ?
मैं यार लुधियाने तो
I was born there.
You born in yeah, I see. Okay. And ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਤੋਂ?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ।
ਮੈਂ ਲੁਧਿਆਣੇ ਤੋਂ ਹਾਂ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਨੇ 20 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ US ਵਿੱਚ.
Now let's talk about how you got into blockchain. So what was your career before it?
Yeah, so most of my career has been at the intersection of business and technology. As I mentioned, my undergrad was in computer science and engineering. And then I got into business school, did a master's in computer information systems because I wanted to understand the business of technology.
Wow.
And I was never really a good developer, to be honest. But I saw the value in what technology-led disruption could bring. So I've had a long career in consulting. Then about 2016, when I learned about blockchain, I understood the value of it. I actually quit my corporate job in 2017.
You quit it. You trusted it so much that you quit your job. Wow.
Well, I wanted to be on the leading edge of technology, and what I was doing at that time wasn't that exciting. So I felt like my full potential was not being utilized. So I decided to just take a leap. And sometimes, things happen that you don't expect to happen, but unless you take the jump, you never know that they could happen. So then the first TED Talk happened in 2019, or so rather the TEDx talk happened in 2019.
The virtual, the digital, the abstract.
And then the second talk happened in 2020, which you mentioned. In between, I also started developing a course, which got titled as Blockchain Strategy for Business Leaders. We can talk in more detail about it. So I've been teaching that course inside corporations, Fortune 500 companies, to CXOs and senior executives, and also to mid-level startups who want to get into the space or who actually want to develop products in the space. Alongside, I started writing a book, so we can talk a little bit more in detail later about the book. Along this journey, I've also, in fact, started a few blockchain startups, and maybe I shouldn't say this in public, but I have failed at them. And I think an entrepreneur journey is important to recognize failure. And the failure wasn't really a failure to execute, it was a failure to find product market fit, which I think is a big issue in startups today. There are a lot of startups that even are well funded, but have not been able to find a product market fit yet.
True.
So it's been an exciting journey of consulting, of education, executive education, entrepreneurship, writing, and publicly speaking about blockchain, and coming up with this term called blockchain strategy, which I think encompasses the business, the economic, and the technological aspect of this technology.
अब बात करते हैं डिजिटल एसेट्स के बारे में। यार जब 90s का जमाना था तब लिमिटेड ऑप्शंस थी यार इन्वेस्ट करने की। गोल्ड हो गया, लैंड होगी, तब माना जाता था बाइंग अ हाउस इज द बेस्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट। And now when I look at investment in 2021, or 2022, I'm just amazed. लोग डिजिटल घर, डिजिटल लैंड मेटावर्स में खरीद रहे हैं। What do you think is the value? NFTs का मैं शायद फिर भी मान लूंगा। NFTs का like डिजिटल आर्ट जब आप क्रिएट करते हो, it's to give credit to the owner of the art, or it is actually to have a collectible. लोगों को कलेक्शन कलेक्ट करना अच्छा लगता है तो इसका NFTs खरीदे। I get it. But what's the benefit of digital hand? जहाँ पे जिस घर में आप कभी रह ही नहीं सकते, why would you buy that house? Digital house. What is the value in it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It's the question of value. And I explored that in a lot of detail in the last TEDx talk that you mentioned. So I'll say the same thing as I said in the talk. The value lies in the eyes of the beholder. Some people approach value in terms of its utility. So you buy a certain asset, what is the utility of that such asset? Right? So if you buy a car, which is not an asset but a liability, because it doesn't appreciate in price, but the utility of a car is it takes you from point A to point B.
Yes, it's useful.
Useful in some ways. Now you can ask, if you buy a stock or an equity of a company, what is the value of that? People approach that value in terms of price. And in my opinion, price is not equal to value, but that is one way to look at it, that the price of that underlying asset would increase. Hence, I should buy it, and it is valuable.
Yes, any expectation makes
Any
it.
expectation of appreciation of price is what makes it valuable.
Yes.
Right? So here's a quote I've heard. Money is not actually made, it's just transferred from one perception to another.
Correct.
Right? So that is one way to look at it. So when you talk about digital land or land in the metaverse, and you talk about what is the utility or value of it, there's a few ways to look at it. One is technologies like blockchain and some others are now allowing us to capture assets or create assets out of attributes that were never monetized before, or never being able to monetize before. Right? As you mentioned, there were only a few attributes or things that we would call assets. Stock or mutual funds, which is a basket of stocks, real estate or property as we call it in India, or currency, or minerals like gold. And that's basically your set of assets. Right? Or a business itself, right? A running business with a revenue, etc., etc. So that's also an asset. So as I explained in the TEDx talk, I think what's happened is we are now able to capture attributes that can be made valuable. So I'll give you an example. Let's take music as an example. So a piece of music or a song or even a video, or make a longer video and call it a film. What was the value of it? There is an artistic value of capturing a story, and there's an entertainment value. And then there was a business value. In India, we have this obsession with box office numbers. How many people actually go and watch the movie? And now we've started to release movies on the OTT platforms, and we look at how many people are watching. Right? So now if I went a step further and said, let's say an artist, pick your favorite artist, will produce a video, a music video, but they will mint it or capture it as a non-fungible token, as an NFT. And then they will auction this NFT. Before releasing it to the public, they will auction it to their fans and say, who wants to be the owner of this NFT? So think about it this way. Pick up your favorite movie. If somebody gave you the option to own the rights to that movie, and if you had enough money to value it in the right way and own it, and then distribute it to others, you might be interested.
Yeah, I see it.
So what's going to happen now is, and it's already happening, if you notice music videos and NFTs, there have been a lot of artists that have put out their music first as NFTs before releasing it on a platform like YouTube or Spotify. Right? So same thing can be said for sporting events and sporting moments. So if you look at what's happened in NBA Top Shot, what is NBA Top Shot? It's a marketplace to buy collectibles, digital collectibles of NBA highlighted moments. In fact, this is happening in cricket as well. ICC, I saw last year, released cricket digital collectibles. What is that? It's basically an authenticated, secure capture of that sporting moment that somebody considers valuable. It's a collective, right? So the value eventually lies in the eye of the beholder. Now, talking about metaverse, there is or there will be utility value.
Mhm.
So think about it this way: if you play some video games like Fortnite, people who've been in the gaming space are already used to virtual goods and virtual currencies within the game itself. You can buy skins, you can buy avatars, you can spend money on buying certain virtual goods. By money, I mean the currency that goes inside the video.
Yes, like the Fortnite coin kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now we're just extending that to a larger scale
Mhm.
and to multiple different universes, so to say, hence called the metaverse. So what if you're really good at Fortnite and you have the so-called Fortnite coin and you've amassed a lot of it, and then you started to play a different game, a new game. Let's say you started to play Call of Duty. Can you use that coin in Call of Duty? Today you cannot. But perhaps in the metaverse you could, just as an example,
I see.
right? So talk about digital real estate. So how does physical real estate work? Why does this building that we're sitting in has value? Because you could rent offices, and you can rent living dwellings like condos or apartments,
Mhm.
and somebody pays rent to live there, right? Why do they pay rent? Because they want to live in the city, they want to go see a show in the city, they want to go meet with their friends, go to a restaurant, hang out at a park. There's a social aspect to a lifestyle. Now, let's say that we are going to do the exact same social activity or set of activities in the metaverse. That is where the digital real estate would derive its value from. So, I'll give you an example. There's a particular metaverse type platform that I've been helping recently. I won't be able to say the name, but you go buy, let's say, a monument,
Mhm.
a real life monument that has been replicated in that digital world. And then you start charging a fee for people to come see that monument in your
Metaverse.
metaverse.
Mhm.
Now we've created a utility. We can take it further. Because you own that plot of land and that monument, you can use that as a line of credit, and you can use it to buy other things if somebody's willing to give you credit. We'll get to that. So what you will see is metaverse will have decentralized finance type option. There'll be lending, there'll be borrowing, there'll be similar economic activities that we see in the real world extended to a virtual world. And if you're a generation that thinks that is absurd, then I have news for you. If you think that this is never going to happen, it is happening today. It is not something that could happen or might happen in the future.
We
It
have
is
to-
happening today.
We have to accept it.
Well, you accept it or not is your choice. Your acceptance doesn't change anything. It doesn't, change the course,
Yes.
because a lot of people have already accepted it,
Yes.
right? And now you may say, well, it is a tulip mania. It is absurd, mad rush of con men trying to sell you a bridge too far, a meme stock or a cartoon. And there is some truth to that. The point I'm making is not everything on the metaverse is going to be valuable. Not all assets are going to be sold for millions. In fact, go look at the statistics on NFTs today. Most NFTs are not sold. Forget sold for a higher price. Most NFTs are not sold.
They fail.
They fail.
Yes.
And the failure is not to capture value from a technological standpoint. The failure is to create a market for your asset. So, in the case of WeBull, why did that artist get so much attention for their creation? It's because they've been an artist, a digital artist, for a long time, and they have curated adoption and a fan base and a patron base, and they've created a market for their asset.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those, just as in the real world, those assets that fail to create a market in the metaverse for themselves will eventually fail, will go to zero. And I predict about 95% of these assets will go to zero. So be careful on what you buy.
Mhm.
And your expectation, if your only expectation is that somebody else will pay a better price, well, you better be right on that.
Yes.
Right? So there's both sides to look of what is value. Value is just transferring a currency
Mhm.
from one perception to another.
That brings me to the point, like, हम हमेशा hype देखते हैं. We always look at the good picture that, oh, NFTs sold for millions and millions of dollars. We never look at the NFTs which are like failing. Someone invested even up to like thousands of dollars and they fail. No one buys them. Yeah. So that's
That's the truth.
Yeah.
And we will experiment with this. This is, from a metaverse and an NFT standpoint, last year was the breakthrough or breakout year for NFTs.
Mhm.
And we're still early in that game. We're definitely not early in the blockchain technology space or evolution of blockchain technology, but we're definitely early in the evolution of NFT marketplaces
Mhm.
and NFT markets. And what you will find is, as we said, most of them will not survive.
Right.
But the ones that do will have an asymmetric level of returns.
Mhm.
Will have asymmetric, it's like the power law. The ones that succeed will succeed in an asymmetric manner.
Absolutely. So let me quote a news from India. On February 1st, CNBC reported India to launch its own digital currency in 22 to 2023. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitaraman, while talking about India's budget 2022, said the introduction of the digital rupee would be based on blockchain and other technologies. And I think it's kind of ironic because while India had been pushing against Bitcoin and now it's trying to launch its own digital asset. So, what are your thoughts on it? Because I think it beats the purpose or the principle of decentralization.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few aspects to uncover here. Let's separate a few things out first. A central bank digital currency, CBDC as we call it, is what India is launching as its digital rupee. It is not the same as a digital currency issued by a private player, and we'll get into that in a second.
Mhm.
And I remember watching the talk Honorable Minister gave after the budget session, and she mentioned something very interesting. She said the only currency we would recognize is the one issued by the RBI, the Central Treasury of India.
Mhm.
And any other type of instruments, they don't consider as currencies. So that's an important distinction. So now let's look at pros and cons of CDBCs. So CDBCs have been explored by a number of different countries. China already has one, has been using one for the last few years. And in fact, US has also been experimenting and evaluating the potential of a digital dollar. The first question people ask is, well, I already use dollars or rupees on online transaction today. What is the difference? Why is this a digital dollar and why do we have to launch a new one while we already have one?
Mhm.
So the basic difference is this. What we have today is what in our space we call fiat currencies.
Mhm.
And we are using a certain technological architecture and the internet-based technologies, if you will, to transact that fiat currency. So the transaction may be digital, but the currency itself is not natively digital. And I'll explain this further. What happens when you launch a CDBC? It's not just launching of a currency or an instrument. It actually is a separate set of rails. It's a separate infrastructure. It's a new infrastructure that must be then developed to transact in this new currency. And that is what these countries are finding valuable. What happens is the the cost of managing currency goes lower.
Mhm.
So today's infrastructure to manage the fiat currency has a certain cost via these private sector, public sector banks, RBI, etc. So now that a new infrastructure will be enabled, which will be blockchain enabled and cryptographically secured, hopefully it'll be more efficient than the current infrastructure to manage the digital transaction of fiat currencies, which is the world we live in today. So that's a distinction that's not really visible to a consumer or a user, but it's more on the back end of management of such currencies. And not just management in terms of transactions, but even issuance of such currencies. So there's a big cost to issue cash and rupees, bills and coins. So we have seen world over, consumers are moving more and more into a digital economy. They are more and more comfortable using your cards, your Apple Pays, your Google Pays, your PayPals, your Venmos, whatever you use in India, Paytm. We're moving to a more comfortable adoption of payments using digital means. This will be accelerated by launching a CBDC. Now, here's the flip side, which is what you were talking about. So making it blockchain enabled definitely improves the security and efficiency of this new currency. It also enables a direct relationship from RBI to the consumer. Here's what I mean by that. So you've all used cryptocurrencies today. You know that there is a wallet. This wallet could be on your phone or your computer or a hot wallet somewhere or a cold wallet. There is a relationship between you and the issuer directly through that wallet. Meaning what? Meaning RBI tomorrow, if it wanted to give you a stimulus, or in the case of US, the Treasury Department wanted to give you a citizen of the country stimulus, it doesn't have to go through other banks to do it. It can directly send you $1,000 or 5,000 rupees or whatever the case is. There is a direct relationship. Their infrastructure exists for a direct relationship. There is a wallet where the central bank's treasury can interact with you directly.
I see.
Which is the new, let's call it, distinction from the old way of doing things.
I see.
Right? Now, the flip side is the people who argue against it would say, well, that violates my privacy. The government now sees all the transactions that I make.
No, they don't, right? Because they can just see the public key, not your name.
It depends. That's a great point. It depends on how that system is architected. Your privacy is not a given. It's an architectural choice. So I'll give you an example of my viewpoints on this. So in my first TEDx talk, I talked about privacy and users' control over our own data. So if you look at the Indian system of Aadhaar card, although it has reached a lot of benefits and it's gotten a lot of people included in a larger economic system, my basic concern with it has always been that it is a centralized system owned and operated by the government.
Correct.
Today, everything is fine. Tomorrow, the government says there is a certain section of population or a certain type of demographic that we want to cut off from economic activity. Now they have Aadhaar card to do so. It becomes a medium of censorship, an instrument of denying somebody a certain set of financial rights. And it works fine till it doesn't. So that's one aspect. Privacy is a big concern with CBDCs. The other concern is, if you widen the lens a little bit, what's happening at a geopolitical and strategic stage is the following. And I wrote an article about this in 2020 when I talked about Libra and the race to private digital currencies.
I don't know what Libra is.
Libra is the first incarnation of Facebook's digital currency or Meta, what we call Meta now. Meta's digital currency. The first incarnation was Libra, and the next was DM.
I see.
They changed the name.
Yes,
Right?
I see. Okay.
So when Libra came out, we did a full analysis. There's a couple of talks on my video library, and we wrote a 4-part analysis of Libra and what it did. So here's the bigger picture. There is a race today amongst countries and what I call digital native companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google, etc., etc. There's a race to establish a dominance of a currency for digital commerce, meaning what is the reserve or de facto currency of the internet? And by that, I don't mean using a fiat currency with different set of rails as we do today, but what is going to be the new digital currency for the internet, for digital commerce? So there's a competition now. There's an arms race, and everybody's trying to get there. And there are different forces that are acting. And what are the different horses that are running in this race, so to say? One are CBDCs. Every country is looking to issue CBDC. Or most countries are. Over 20 countries have experimented. So why do they want to issue it? Because they want to be the reserve, de facto, default currency for commerce on the internet, which is where consumer commerce is going, and even trade finance is going, right? The second horse is private digital native companies, as we mentioned, association led by Facebook called Libra, etc., etc. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a second, but that's the second horse. The third horse are stable currencies.
Yes, like our
Stable
USDT, USDC.
Right. So now it is to be seen which one of them win. And by win, I mean which one of them get the most adoption. Because that is the only way to be the default currency. So these geopolitical games are going to be played. And this is in a way, this is a move that India has made as a response to China's move and also as a response to Facebook's move of issuing Libra and DM. But the fact of the matter is, as we record this today, Facebook is backing out from DM.
Yes, it actually failed, DM.
It failed to get regulatory approval. So think about it. Why did it fail to get regulatory approval? It's not a technological issue. It's a control and governance issue.
Yes. One company owning DM is dangerous than a country's economy holding it.
Well, a global economy would be dependent on that, right? Yeah. They could have more power than any of the other reserve currencies, yes. Right? So this tug of war of control and governance will continue. And the big picture we should realize is that these companies, the ones I have mentioned, and nothing wrong with them. I work with them. I like them. I'm just making an observation as an analyst. They have a lot of power. And the way the power is exercised is the direct relationship they have between themselves and the consumer, which is you. So think about if you have a Facebook account and I give you a Facebook currency wallet directly into your account, you can do a number of things, but the Facebook as a company would also know what you're doing, right? So you can accelerate the speed of commerce using that currency for your ecosystem. So the question here is which ecosystem gets bigger and which one gets more adopted. So we'll leave it at that, but that's the juxtaposition. So coming back to your point on decentralization. Decentralization is also a spectrum. It is not a one static aspect, meaning we have gone from architectures that have been completely centralized to, let's say, a little bit decentralized to further decentralized.
I see. Like the spectrum we learned in our CBSE board, like the spectrum of light.
Yeah.
Like कहीं जगह पे ज़्यादा होती है, कहीं कम होती है. वैसे ही.
Right. So the way to think about it is the following. Which is the most decentralized cryptocurrency today? It's Bitcoin.
Yes.
But some will argue that even that is being more centralized. So, because computation power is being accumulated in a few countries like China and Russia,
More than
more than some other
I
countries.
see.
It started as a peer-to-peer network, but it is getting more centralized now. Right? So we will continue to play this game of how much decentralization. There are benefits to decentralization, and then there are some benefits to centralization. What's happening is, if you ask the crypto evangelists and the crypto analysts, they will say a centralized country should not issue CBDC in a centralized manner because it's co-opting our technology. And that may be a fair statement. But what does the country see? Country see a new technology to enable a faster, more efficient rails, but have a centralized control. And this is the tug of war we will continue to fight. So as an analyst, you have to look at both sides and then see where do you want to invest your time, effort, and skills.
Absolutely. Yes. Sounds good.
Does that help?
Yes, that helps. Yeah. Now let's segue into blockchain development. मुझे पता है काफी students देख रहे हैं as computer science students. So currently, जो blockchain app development, I'm just talking about blockchain app development. Some people do it on Ethereum, also on Bitcoin right now, or Solana. There are like so many technologies. So can you please give us an idea what technologies should target, and what do you think about these development opportunities for them?
Right. Yeah, so there are a number of aspects one must think about when looking at blockchain protocol development and then layering applications on top of that. Yeah. So first point I'll make is that folks looking to develop or get into this space as a developer, they should first look at protocols. I think that's where the most value is being created. And that may be more challenging aspect of development. It may not be as, quick gratification, but that is where the most value, the most impact is being created. So you mentioned Solana and you mentioned Ethereum. So a few factors to think about, the distinction between these two and number of others, Cardano, Neo, EOS. I mean, we can keep going on and on.
Hundreds.
Right. So you won't get a direct response from me on which one is better, because as a public analyst, I don't want to put my finger on the scale in any one of them, on any one of them. But here's what I would say: look at a few factors: decentralization, the consensus mechanisms, their scalability. So there's a diagram I teach, a triangle of scalability, security, and decentralization. Scalability, security, and decentralization. You can maximize two of the three. You cannot maximize all three. So the reason that you see all these different permutation and combination as different protocols is because they're making different architectural choices. They're making a choice on higher throughput and perhaps a different kind of, or different level of security, which is the case in Bitcoin, which is the opposite case in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is more secure, but less throughput. Wherein Ethereum is more throughput than Bitcoin. And then you would say Solana is even higher throughput.
Throughput, yes. What's throughput, by the way?
Transactions per second.
I see.
Right. So how many transactions can you confirm? How quickly?
Bitcoin has less throughput, but more secure. Ethereum has more throughput and more secure.
I wouldn't say they're more secure. They use a different mechanism of security.
Like both use proof of work for now, Ethereum and Bitcoin.
Yeah, but the way they've implemented it is slightly different.
I see.
Right, and then if you look at Solana, it uses a completely different consensus mechanism.
Like it's a database.
Right. So the question is of scalability. How quickly can this scale? How many transactions can it take? And how quickly the transactions can be confirmed.
I see.
Right.
Yes. Let me bring an analogy into it. जैसे हम programming में सीखते हैं ना, like no programming language is perfect. One could be faster to code in, one could be more efficient, it runs faster, and one could be that programming language is really slow, like it runs slow and it's slow to write. For example, if you have 5 developers, only one of them know Objective-C, 4 know Swift, you will definitely choose Swift because you can finish the project faster. More of it, no. So you have to actually do that triangle as well. कितने developers हैं, कौन सी language fast है, और किसमें आप code जल्दी लिख सकते हो. So it's kind of
from a business standpoint, you definitely have to do that. To allocate resources, you have to think about what is the ease of development.
Yes.
And some of these platforms, they are easier to develop versus others, and there could be a learning curve. Now, the other aspect to think of is not all of these protocols are suited for all use cases. This is going back to the first topic that we discussed. How do you align the choice of use case to the choice of blockchain architecture or protocol architecture, to be specific? And that itself gives you a number of permutations. So, for instance, let's take an example. If I'm developing an application, not a protocol, but an application for healthcare records, for my x-rays, my test records, etc., all these vaccination records, etc. Do I need really high throughput or do I need higher security? That's a question. Versus if I'm developing, let's say, a high frequency trading application using blockchain, I need higher throughput.
Yes. Other case,
right? So it's an identity use case versus a financial high frequency transaction use case.
Totally.
And they would need, or they would suffice with different blockchain or protocol architectures. And that's the challenge the developers, the students you're talking about, have to make. And then they also have to see how many developers are using such protocols. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is the more adoption you have on the development ecosystem, the better tend to be your SDKs, your libraries, the better testing you can do. So I don't think there is an outright winner at the moment. Obviously, Ethereum's been much longer and possibly has the highest level of adoption at the moment in the developer ecosystem.
Yes.
But there are others that are catching up really fast and provide different aspects and trade-offs, design trade-offs, that are more valuable in certain use cases. So, Solana, Neo, EOS, Cardano, Polygon. Polygon is an excellent example out of India.
Yes, Polygon, yeah, totally.
Right, they just did a huge raise, and congratulations to them. And that's an excellent example of how we're getting to next generation protocols. Mm-hmm. So in a few years, we would wonder that we started from Bitcoin's architecture and we've arrived here. It's almost like we started from, Kitty Hawk, the Wright brothers flying the first aircraft to a spaceship.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
We're not that far from that level of technological innovations in protocol. And the one interesting thing for me is, if it took us 100 years to go from the Wright brothers flying a single-engine plane to a spacecraft, the rate of evolution, the rate of improvement of these protocols is way faster. Mm-hmm. So it's like 1 year in blockchain development is like 20 years in the real world. Mm-hmm. So it's like dog years. 1 dog year is 7 human years or something. That's how it feels in the blockchain development space. So when students are looking to get into development, I would encourage them to first look into protocols. If you can come up with new protocols, you're definitely creating a lot more value. And then if you want to develop applications, then make a choice on the underlying architecture and the underlying platform. And that choice becomes very important. And don't let that choice just be on popularity. It's like, my 3 friends know Solidity and they write in Ethereum, so I must write in Ethereum. There is no law that says that. Uh-huh. Look at your use case and look at the top 10, 20 protocols and platforms available, and then figure out which protocol is the best choice for your use case. And don't forget, we have just talked about public blockchains. There are private permission-based blockchains via Hyperledger, etc. Hyperledger has 9 different products now. So don't forget that your use case may be a more private permission-based blockchain, which a lot of crypto folks may not like to get into that, but there are a lot of business applications that are being developed on private permission-based blockchains. I hope that helps.
Definitely. It was so lovely talking to you. I can tell you that I personally have gotten familiar with so many technologies in this whole interview. I'm sure students must be so excited as well. I personally also used to think that, as blockchain development, Ethereum is the only way because the community is bigger. But you have given me a different perspective to look at things. The way I look at programming is kind of analogous to blockchain as well, but some terminology is different at the end of the day. Yep, it was really, really helpful. Awesome. And how you define yourself blockchain strategist? So what are the roles and responsibilities that come with it?
So think about it in a way where you have to first figure out what is the use case that you're building, right? So a company, this is a typical scenario. A company would approach me and say, well, we've been thinking about blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
And in our industry, in our ecosystem, we see some applications, we don't quite understand it well. Can you help us put together first a set of use cases and then a technology architecture behind that use case?
Mm-hmm.
What happens is there's a lot of interest in the technology, so people approach it from purely a technical standpoint, if you are technical minded, but they forget that there has to be eventually a product market fit. They forget the business aspect of it. And to me, they are not divergent or separate. They have to form a part of the whole for it to work. So to be very specific, you have to understand the use case and choose which use case will be the best for this company or this scenario. And then you have to define a blockchain solution architecture, which is where the technical aspect comes in. So to me, an architecture needs to be aligned to the use case.
I see.
And then the use case has to have a market value. There must be some customer's pain that you are solving or some customer gains that you are achieving. Unless you define that, regardless of how well you execute on the technical side, you may not have a business.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides need to actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
So as a blockchain strategist, what I do is align the use case, the market value, business case with a blockchain technology architecture.
I see. So basically, let's say Google comes to you and say that we want to do this. Tell us you will ask them what's the use case of it and align it to a technology and architecture.
Yeah, well, you're almost there. What I do in my courses, it's more like a workshop where we together arrive with top 3 use cases that must be investigated further.
I see.
Because to choose a use case is a exercise in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean, let's take some examples.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you want blockchain to, there's a phone. How do you know that this phone is authentic? You don't. The only guarantee, so to say, you have is going to the right store and buying it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But maybe this is not a phone, maybe it's a luxury bag, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that bag is actually a Louis Vuitton bag or a Chanel perfume? Or is it the right diamond?
Mm-hmm.
Or let's take it on a more consumer side. You go buy organic produce in the market. You said this is organic peach or an organic mango or an organic spinach. Well, how do you know? Can somebody prove it? These are just 10 use cases I've counted. You could use blockchain for this type of use case. The question becomes, which of these use cases has the biggest market? Which one do you want to develop? So that exercise of choosing the right use cases and then choosing a technological architecture behind that supports the use case is not a trivial job. And then from there, you go on to defining your product features. And then from there on, you go on to developing them and implementing them, and then putting them out in the market. And sometimes the first time you put out a product, it doesn't work. So you have to talk to your potential customers and figure out what does the customer want and what is the customer ready and willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
So as an example, if you put out an organic spinach in the market, and let's say it comes with a QR code on the package, where a customer could scan the QR code and it tells you exactly which farm, literally which piece of land was the spinach grown on, what was the temperature along the year while it was growing, various parameters, agricultural and weather, climatic parameters can be captured. And then it was told to you that this is the time it was plucked and harvested, and then it got into this truck and arrived here at this time. Now you have some level of authenticity and proof that this is actually the organic product that you buy. But the customer says, okay, great, thank you, but I'm not going to pay you 30%, 40% more for this organic produce than I pay for the other produce. Well, then your use case and all the effort that you're putting in it may not be worth the effort.
Okay.
So there has to be a market for it.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be what we call in the entrepreneurial ecosystem as a product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a lot about the business side. Slowly we'll get into the technological architecture side as well, where we can see how choice of blockchain architecture or blockchain solution architecture needs to be aligned with the particular use case. Not all blockchain architecture can enable all use cases. So that choice becomes really important. And that's what a blockchain strategist like myself would help you to achieve.
That's a wonderful example. So what is coming up for you in the future? I have read that you have a book and a course coming up. Can you tell us how we can learn more about it?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been writing a book for the last 4 years called Profits in Chaos: Blockchain Strategy to Sow and Survive Disruption.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to the website and sign up for release updates and discounts for the book. Mm-hmm. It should be out sometime this year. And then the course that I mentioned earlier, Blockchain Strategy for Business Leaders, it's been an in-person and a customized course thus far, but we're about to release an on-demand version of it online. So anybody, anywhere in the world can go sign up and take the course. Mm-hmm. I'm also working on another course purely for blockchain founders. It's going to be titled as Blockchain Startup School. Mm-hmm. And that course will come out after this one, also on demand, so you can keep on updates for that as well. Apart from that, watch the talks, and there's a lot of video material online. And definitely share with me what you think about it and what you learned about it. I would love to hear what you and your audience think about it. So we'll just share the link tree with you, and feel free to engage on that. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way.
Sure. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yep, totally. Thank you so much for watching.